In this video, I'm going to go over end behavior of graphs. So really, end behavior is just asking what is the graph doing on each end. So starting with this first one here, you probably noticed that most graphs have two ends, one end on the left and one end on the right. So we're really looking at both of these ends and thinking, well, what's happening at the end? Like, look at the left end. What direction is the left end pointing? Well, we already said it's moving left. It also looks like it's pointing up. And that's what end behavior is. So now let's put that in some more mathematical terms. So like we said, this left end here is pointing to the left, and it's also simultaneously pointing up. It's moving both left and up. First, let's start with the fact that it's moving left. Which values on a graph, the x or the y's, move left and right? If you said the x values, you would be correct. So as we talk about the fact that the left end is moving to the left, we're looking at the x values. And if you think about the x-axis, as you continue to move left and go left and further to the left, to the left, to the left, your numbers are going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, getting closer and closer to negative infinity. So as x approaches negative infinity, that's what we're saying. As x gets closer and closer to negative infinity, that means it's getting closer and closer to the farthest left it could ever possibly go. What is happening to the y values? So remember, if x is moved left and right, it's the y values that move up and down. And we already said this this end of the graph is pointing up. So that means the y values are going up as the x values move left. Well, as y values go up, if I go up forever and ever and ever, the y values are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what's the biggest number they would ever reach? Well, that would be positive infinity. And that right there is one line of our end behavior. As x approaches negative infinity, really we're saying as x goes to the left side of the graph, f of x, which remember is really just y, the y values are moving towards positive infinity. The y is going up. Now we want to talk about the right side of the graph. So on the right side, we're moving to the right, but the end is also pointing up. So starting with the right, remember that left and right is x values. As x moves to the right, and it keeps going to the right and the right and the right, more and more and more, it's getting larger, right? If you were to follow, if you're not sure, you look at the x-axis, right? As I move to the right, the numbers keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually they'll get all the way up to positive infinity. So as x moves to the right, it's approaching positive infinity. Now, as the y values move up, right, and if you look at the y-axis, you can see as we go up, we get closer and closer to large numbers. It's getting closer and closer to positive infinity. So as x moves to positive infinity, this is just saying as we go to the right, f of x, or y, is approaching positive infinity. Y is going up. Now, the graphs that we look at, they always have two ends, and always it has one end on the left and one end on the right. So this part of your end behavior, that as x approaches, one will always be positive and one will always be negative. One will be on the positive side of the graph, one will be on the negative side of the graph, and then it's really the y values that we need to determine. Let's look at this next one. So again, we've got two ends. We have an end on the left and an end on the right. For this end on the left side, so this is as the x's are moving to the left. So remember, as x goes to the left, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's going towards negative infinity. Well, as we move to the left, what other direction is our end going? Well, it's also going down. So the y values are going down and down and down forever and ever and ever, getting a lot closer to negative infinity. So for the first part of our end behavior, x approaches negative infinity. This is just the left side of the graph. And f of x, or y, approaches negative infinity, meaning the left side of the graph is pointing down. On the right side of the graph over here, we're moving to the right, so that's x value. So as x approaches positive infinity on the right, we're getting larger and larger. The arrow is also pointing down. So that means that the y values are going down, 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 all the way to negative infinity. So as x approaches positive infinity, this is the right side of the graph, f of x is approaching negative infinity. It is going down. Now, when we're talking about specifically quadratic functions, these are always parabolas. So we know that parabolas have one of two shapes. They either have the U shape or the hill shape. And in either of these shapes, notice that both ends either both point up or both point down. So like we saw here, the f of x approaches was the same for both lines of the end behavior. And over here, it was the same for both of them as well. And that should always be true for a quadratic function because both ends always point in the same direction.